in one of the really most dynamic offensive playoff games I've ever seen. At one point, Jason Timpf joining me, Hoops Tonight, great podcast for the Volume. At one point tonight, I looked up and Phoenix was shooting 58%. And then like 47 from three, and it was a 6-point game. I thought, this isn't sustainable. I mean, give me a break. But you know what? I want to throw this at you, Jason, is that, and I think this is a benefit of the NBA. Very few controversial NFL players. Very few controversial baseball players or soccer players in America. Maybe internationally they are. But in the NBA, there's a lot of drama. Kawhi drama, AD drama, LeBron, Embiid, Ja Morant, Zion. I mean, even guys who are low-key, Jokic gets involved in an MVP debate. And I've always said the NBA is the great story league. It's got great drama. It's a soap opera. And then there's Devin Booker. Like Chris Paul has a love-hate relationship with fans. So does KD. And Booker goes out. He's Klay Thompson with better handles. Like, chill. He's on one of the great heaters I've ever seen in the history of the playoffs. He's really it's very rare because the NBA, between shoe sales and social media, it drums up a ton of stories. And, you know, I know he likes old cars. Like there's just no story. And I watch him play and he's got a little bit of an old school thing. He still loves the mid-range jumper, but he can hit the three. He's not like Carmelo where he wouldn't embrace it in his prime. Like he'll move back and shoot it. I mean, as somebody, you played basketball. I think he's more athletic than Klay Thompson with a better ball handler. But there is sort of this, I'm just going to show up and do my job. You know, Klay at this point is very hot and cold. He was terrible last game, great in game 2. What do you make of Booker's heater?
You know, it's so interesting, Colin, because I think the worst thing that happened to him in his career was that he started averaging 25 points a game pretty early. And was on a bad team. And so he's been averaging, you know, he's been a mid-20s, high-20s scorer who's relatively efficient for a really long time. And so then Chris Paul came to the team, and really it had nothing to do, Chris Paul played a part of it, but they just added a lot of talent. They added a lot of veterans. They added DeAndre Ayton. They added Chris Paul, and they started playing in these big playoff games. And everyone just attributes all of the success to the team to everything but Devin Booker. But over the years, despite him reaching that scoring peak early, he's added a lot of things. He's become a much, much better defensive player. He's become an outstanding playmaker in high pick and roll. He had 10 assists again tonight. And like you said, he's just on an all-time great shot-making run right now. And it's been as we go back in his playoff career, he was kind of on a crazy hot shot-making run in that 2021 run when they almost won the title. Yep. It was Chris Paul that fell apart at the end. He's been unbelievable. I think that he's gone under the radar as a product of the success of the team around him. But I think he's legitimately in that same list with the guys like Jason Tatum and Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid and all those 8, 9, 10 guys that we put at the top of the league. He's in that tier. He's probably near the bottom of that tier, but he's in that tier. Like he's a bona fide superstar in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think it's sustainable. I still I thought Phoenix, I watched them play the Clippers and I thought, if you could give them Norman Powell off the bench, you'd be like, oh, okay, they need a guy. They need a guy off the bench. And then Chris Paul gets hurt. Cameron Payne now inserted in. It's like now they don't have any guy. Like they have no bench. So they're not a championship team. They're just not. I mean, Boston's going to bring 8-9. Warriors can bring 8-9. Lakers, although I think they have a lot of B players, can give you 8-9 guys. I mean, Phoenix is like 6. So, and I don't think it's sustainable. You know, I told somebody the other day, I think the Nuggets will win the next 2 games. And I think what's going to happen is Denver's going to have a 1-0 series lead in the Western Conference Finals because I think they're going to vanquish the Suns here very quickly. And then the Lakers and Warriors, 2 older teams, are going to go 7. And then one of them, with no rest, flies to high-altitude Denver. They're going to get run off the floor in Game 1. And so Denver's going to have a 1-0 series lead. My takeaway on Denver is they're highly efficient. Jokic is insane. Not every championship team, Jason, is great. The Spurs team was mostly unappetizing to a lot of the nation. The ratings were really bad in that early LeBron team against the Spurs. Not every championship team is fascinating. I mean, the Utah Jazz I liked him, but there were the pick and roll. I mean, even Malone wasn't highly vertical. He was kind of a bully around the basket. So would you agree that Denver, though, is going to? I think they're going to win the next 2 games. That's my take here.
I think so too. I mean, you said it's not sustainable, and that's not an insult, Colin. It's literally it would be unprecedented in NBA history for Devin Booker to continue to shoot the way he's been shooting. He was 13 for 17 on pull-up jump shots in Game 3. Kevin Durant just had what I thought was the best pull-up jump shooting season ever, and he shot 55%. Like, the best in the world at that shot make about half of them, and Devin Booker's making like over 75% of them. So it is not sustainable. And, the thing is as we look back throughout the series, kind of like Game 2 when Nikola Jokic made 14 shots in the paint. Again tonight, just living in the paint, makes some jump shots. He's going to make some jump shots. He made some crazy ones. That and one over Devin Booker was crazy. But there's no doubt that as you look at the shot quality moving forward, Denver gets a little bit better shots that are much more likely to be replicated as we move forward, and they have 2 of the final 3 games at home. So that's not to say the Suns can't win. If Devin and KD go into Denver and they shoot the lights out again, yes, they can win the series. But the safer bet is Denver because they're getting better shots and they have home court and what I think is the best home court advantage in the NBA.
All right, let's pivot to a wildly entertaining series. Ugly for most of it. James Harden carries the Sixers. Another absolutely remarkable James Harden game. It's hard to get my arms around what the Sixers are. Between Embiid's health, kind of the roller coaster of Harden at this point in his career. I kind of always know the athleticism I'm going to get from Maxey. Tobias Harris can be a hot, cold scorer. My takeaway when I watched that game, and even if Boston would have won in both regulation and the fourth quarter and overtime, Boston's last possession. You guys have been playing together for 6 years. Get it together. Like, everybody can bang on the coach for not calling a timeout, but my takeaway is in that moment with that group, like if Stephen Clay, Draymond, and Wiggins had 11 seconds, I wouldn't want the Lakers to be set. They're too good defensively. I'd rather be them. I'd rather have them backpedaling a little bit, kind of looking to the sideline. I generally, if you have a veteran team and a rotation you're comfortable with, I wouldn't call a timeout. It goes back to the years ago, the Seahawks-Patriots were in a Super Bowl. It was a real chess match, Pete Carroll and Belichick. And, Belichick's defense, he wouldn't call a timeout. He was like, we know what you're doing. This is why we agonize over practice. And so the Celtics and the Warriors are the 2 teams in the league right now. I'm not calling a timeout. My experience is my edge. Lakers, a brand new team since the deadline. I'd call a timeout. I'd want to get the ball to AD. Even Denver's kind of young. Philadelphia depends on who's healthy and who's hot. So this comes down to something there's an apprehension with Boston I just can't get past. I can't get past it. I do not trust them. Games decided by 500 or 5 points or less, I could be wrong. I think they're now 13-14. That doesn't make sense with those guys. Does it?
The part that drove me crazy about that final possession was them waiting so damn long. Like, James Harden made that shot with like 12 seconds left. It's a 1-point game. So if you go down and you miss, you have a chance to foul and get another opportunity. They basically dribbled the clock out to try to work to a specific switch they wanted on Jason Tatum. They didn't actually start to look to attack until like 5 or 6 seconds left. And so, the thing with Boston is I agree with you. They don't really need organization because they have so many good matchups and they're always going to force you to help off of a shooter. Like Malcolm Brogdon, a wide open 3 in the left wing at the end of that game that he ended up missing. They're going to generate wide open looks. It's just go quickly. It's the stagnation with Boston that becomes a problem when they dribble up the floor and they just take a contested jump shot, or they get the switch they want, but then they stand and they stare around for 10 seconds before they do something. I was so impressed by James Harden in this game because he's kind of beating allegations in this playoff run because he kind of has a reputation for being a player that can fade later in series. And this was a super unique performance from James Harden because this is at a point in the series where they figured him out, right? They are forcing him to his right hand every single time. He had back-to-back at the end of regulation when Joel Embiid was crumbling under Al Horford, just And Joel made a couple of huge plays in OT, so like including the double team kick out to James Harden for the game winner and a little fadeaway over Al Horford. But Horford was completely falling off the face of the earth again. Embiid was in that fourth quarter, and James Harden carried them. He had a hard isolation against Jason Tatum, where he got into the lane to his right hand and made a floater. He had a pull-up jump shot on Jaylen Brown, where he got to his right hand and took a jump shot. Like he has gone to his weakness, because that's what the playoffs are about, or forcing you to be uncomfortable, forcing you to do things that make you feel uncomfortable. And he's having success in the weakest areas of his game. And I think a big part of it is him not relying on the step back jump shot from three, or not just driving into the teeth of the defense and trying to draw fouls, but taking what the defense is giving him, which is those mid-range shots, the little floaters in the lane, the little pull-up jump shots. I was so impressed by James Harden in this game. And look, like, it sucks that he's so inconsistent, but this is what you want from a second star. He doesn't have to be there every night, but he needs to be able to win you a game or two in the playoffs, and Harden's won you 2 in this series so far.
Well, and also, a lot of the teams he was on before, he was such a ball-centric scoring machine, but by the time he got to the second round of the playoffs, it felt like he was gassed. Whereas Embiid's the MVP. Tobias Harris gives you about every third game, he gives you a big game. Maxey has control of the ball. So it's not as Harden reliant. I mean, he can play poorly and they can win. Maybe not in the playoffs, but in the regular season. So I feel like he's got more energy. I feel like there are times, like today, I thought, oh no, he's not tired at all. Embiid looked gassed. It's like, Harden didn't. Yeah, Harden didn't look gassed at all. All right, now we go to the Lakers-Warriors. And let's spend some time on this. I was thinking about this series, and when Golden State was playing Sacramento, I felt like they were facing a less talented version of themselves, but they were really looking in the mirror a lot. And that's why I always felt strongly they were going to win the series, because they kind of knew the next trick. They could kind of guess what was going to happen next. Sacramento's about a wing player away, a Wiggins away from being the Warriors, right? They have some of the same components. But the Lakers are the opposite of the Warriors. Size, great rim protection, AD a dominant, big, length, inconsistent shooting, sometimes poor shooting, undrafted players, bounce around the league guys. They don't have the cohesion. They're a trade deadline team. I'm like, they're the opposite of the Warriors. And I think there are times in this series, I feel like the Warriors are a little flummoxed. They're not. This is like, it's like in boxing facing a left-handed boxer. You're like, I know I'm better than him, but I don't have a sparring partner that's a lefty. I've never faced a lefty. And I just feel like, to me, the Warriors feel they can't quite make up their mind. Do they want to challenge the Lakers at the rim, or are they just going to do pull-ups? Now, they went back to kind of attacking the rim a couple of times, and I'm like, guys, it's not going to work. AD's as good a defender as the league have. That's not going to work. So I don't feel the same way I did with Sacramento, where I felt kind of this kind of hovering confidence. Like, they're going to figure out, even though they'd been a bad road team, they solved that fast. But I do think Kerr will make adjustments. But boy, there are moments in this series they look small and frustrated. Is that they look small and frustrated at times?
This is a different type of team than any team that we've seen the Warriors play, really, in this entire era, when you factor in the combination of their interior size and the offensive skill that they have around them. Here's a crazy stat for you, Colin. The Lakers have won 5 postseason games this year, shooting below 30% from 3. So, you're absolutely right. They could not be more different than what this Warriors team is. I think this series has been such this entire playoff run has been such I think Darvin Ham has been so incredibly impressive. He's hit a bunch of the right notes. I thought he made a bunch of key adjustments in Game 6 against Memphis, shrinking the rotation to the correct 8 guys, tweaking his coverage of Desmond Bane. It was a masterclass. And then you go into this series, and it's Game 1, we knew the Warriors were going to throw their fastball, which was all their off-ball stuff with their main lineup. And Darvin Ham just top-locked all the shooters, funneled everybody into the paint. It was a disaster. Game 2, the predictable adjustment from Steve Kerr. Lots of Steph Curry high pick and roll. Draymond Green kills him in the short roll the entire game. Genius adjustment from Darvin Ham. He puts Jared Vanderbilt onto Draymond Green. and Austin Reeves onto Steph Curry so they can switch the Steph-Draymond pick and roll. Now when they bring Anthony Davis into the screen, it's a roll man like JaMychal Green or Kevon Looney who's just nowhere near as good at making those decisions in the short roll as Draymond Green is. It's been a masterclass coaching performance from Darvin Ham, in my opinion. You know what's interesting, and this is why I say it's different than any other Warriors opponent in this era. In the past, it used to be that the Warriors would play your best players off the floor. Oh, we're going to play your center off the floor because he's too slow. We're going to play this guard off the floor because he can't guard. In this series, the Lakers have been able to keep their core rotation. And guess what? The Warriors have had to cut way back on Gary Payton's minutes. And they've had to cut way back in Kevon Looney's minutes because of the Anthony Davis problem. We focus so much on superstar offensive players and their ability to overcome anything. Look at what Devin Booker did tonight. Look at what Steph Curry's done throughout his playoff career. Anthony Davis, not single-handedly, but he's carrying the vast majority of this load, is exposing his defensive superpower to slow down this Warriors offense. I think it's been one of the best defensive performances I've ever seen from a player. This is very different. This is a very different type of challenge. Series is not over. I think the winner of Game 4 wins the series. But man, this is definitely going to be a unique challenge for the Warriors.
Well, yeah, game 5 and Game 7, which are huge games, obviously. Deciding Game 7 are both at Chase Center. How great have the NBA playoffs been so far? Miami upsetting the number 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks. How about Warriors, Kings go 7? The Knicks upset the Cavs. If you live in one of those cities and wanted to go to the games, there is only one place to get tickets: the Game Time app, the fastest growing ticketing app in the U.S. For last minute, amazing deals. They don't stop with the NBA. They do baseball, hockey, concerts, comedy shows too. Download the Game Time app and use the code Colin, COLIN. Get $20 off your first purchase. $20 off first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the Game Time app. Use the code Colin, COLIN. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. The Game Time app. It is interesting. I did not pick the Warriors to get to the finals. And a lot of it was, I think they've struggled all year to figure out, to bridge the old new gap. Now they're not playing Kuminga at all. Moody's good, doesn't play a lot, but he's actually pretty good. Jordan Poole is just infuriating, but I think they need him. My takeaway on this series was the Warriors would win it, but I felt somewhere in the playoffs, whether it was against Jokic or it's against Anthony Davis, or it would be against Embiid, that they would face an offensive-minded center and they just get nothing from their bigs. I mean, when Wiggins was out, Jesus, I mean, they got nothing from anybody but the backcourt for 2 months. I mean, it was just basically Steph kept him at 500. I mean, it was embarrassing. They had no scoring. So Wiggins gives them, your 15 a game at the wing. But I do think that Bob Meyer and Kerr, out of respect for Curry, everything's going to be, they're going to attain players eventually who are on Steph's timeline. Anthony Davis is on his timeline, right? Bigs that can play. And I'm really interested, if they lose this series, they're not going to stand pat. They're just not. And as Looney right now has a reputation that's greater than his game. I mean, he's got no offensive skill. He's a great rebounder. It's like, we can take fewer rebounds. Give me 17 points. If you ran the Warriors as constituted today, and they lost in Game 6, and it was Anthony Davis that just at the rim protecting it and scoring, where do you go? Because I don't think they stand pat. Where would they go?
It's so interesting you asked that, because I was texting a buddy of mine who covers the Warriors the other day. And for the record, do not think this series is over. Would not be the least bit surprised if Golden State won Game 2 and won the series. This is not over. But in the hypothetical scenario where the Warriors lose, what I would do is I would retain your 1, 2, 3. So I would keep Steph, Klay Thompson, and Andrew Wiggins. And then I would go all in on the front line with size and athleticism. And then I'd run a more traditional offense that you see around the NBA, where you rely more on Steph Curry and high pick and roll. It's just the way that the game has been set up. That's where you can have a ton of success these days, especially when you've got shooting and athleticism around you. And Andrew Wiggins and Klay Thompson are great at that specifically. Too often, they've had to rely on being gimmicky to overcome their size issues.
No question.
And it's worked.
Yeah.
Like we're not being critical. They have 4 titles. But, as players start to age out just a little bit and their effectiveness starts to slide just a little bit, it's time to potentially try something different. And in that scenario, I'd go all in on Steph, Clay, and Wiggins, mainly too from an asset standpoint. Like Clay at this phase in his career is going to be tough to get like value for, right? Andrew Wiggins is one of the most important types of players you can have on an NBA roster, like a legit 20-point per game scorer that can guard the other team's best player. Steph, I think, absolutely has at least 2 or 3 more years as a peak level superstar. Then you start to look down the roster, and it's like Jordan Poole, like him or hate him, he's at least an asset that you probably can get some value out of. So that I would definitely look to bolster the front court with just a ton of size and athleticism. Get Steph a real vertical spacing threat so he can actually run. You mentioned Anthony Davis. He might not be attainable, but somebody that can do some of like a poor man's version of him that can play traditional drop coverage rim protection and be a vertical spacing threat. Like, that would be the direction that I'd look to go if they did choose to rebuild.
So it was interesting. LeBron didn't score a single point in that game, and it was and we've discussed this kind of ad nauseum that he really lets the game come to him. And by the way, he should. He kind of waits for it, and so then he turns the Jets on later in games in crucial situations, and it's like a boxer with a knockout punch who's at the end of his career. He just lets the fight come to him, and then the other guy gets worn down. 6th round, he kind of seizes it. 7th round, goes for the knockout. But it's interesting with LeBron that this series, I thought it was a real problem. After game 1, they get 1 day rest. So they're back on the court tomorrow. Do you foresee any problem? Game 4, game 5, game 6, game 7. And I'm watching LeBron the other night, and I'm like, I know what he's doing here. He's waiting for the moment. we may have 4 more of these things. Would you be concerned if you were Darvin Ham about, I don't know, how much can I get out of him? We got 4 games in 8 days potentially. He's not, Jason. That's not what he is now.
I mean, to me, this series comes down to the Lakers absolutely will win if they get 2 more defensive efforts like what they had in game 3. And, LeBron James, there was a timeout after that nasty Andrew Wiggins dunk, and then Steph Curry got a 3 on an offensive rebound putback where they got it back to 12. And after that timeout, LeBron really engaged himself athletically and started blocking shots, getting out in transition. He doesn't quite have the same first step that he usually has, probably a byproduct of the foot injury, which is a byproduct of his age, right? His jump shot has kind of failed him in a lot of different ways in this postseason run. It's highly unusual, but it is what it is. However, next to what Anthony Davis is doing and what Jared Vanderbilt is doing, if LeBron James engages himself as a rebounder and as a defender and pushes in transition when he can, that's all they need from him. That's all they need. That's how good this team is defensively. They don't need him to be 35 point per game historical playoff LeBron. They just need him to be engaged defensively. Now, you said, should Darvin Ham be worried? That's the thing. We have seen this throughout this playoff run and really throughout the entire season. The Lakers struggle to maintain their effort level. I would not be surprised in the slightest if Game 4 was much closer or if the Warriors held a decent-sized lead throughout. The Lakers struggle to maintain that defensive intensity, but it's really that simple to me. If they can get 2 more performances like that, they can win the series. Game 4, I expect to be super close. Game 5, I think Golden State would win 9 times out of 10. And then Game 6, back home in crypto, if you get that 3-2 lead at that point, LeBron was excellent in the closeout game against Memphis. He smells blood in the water, and he summons the necessary energy that he needs. Everything comes down to Game 4 for me.
It's interesting. This is sort of feeling like the bubble year. Anthony Davis was healthy and dominant. Anthony Davis now is on a long streak of healthy and dominant. LeBron was out of his prime, but could be dominant in spurts. There were several players, KCP one, D'Lo here, big shot makers, but you always kind of feel like they're not part of the future, right? Then you have when I always liked KCP. Rich Paul and I talked about this. He was never afraid to take a big shot, like ever. Didn't always love his selection, but I loved his effort. D'Angelo Russell, same thing. He's always willing to take a shot, but I don't think they're going to sign him for a long-term deal. And the West that year was weird. Veteran teams, dovetailed in the postseason in the bubble. They missed their wives and their friends and their kids. And this year's weird. I mean, the Clippers were weird. Denver's a unique team. Golden State had from the punch to the abysmal road performance.
Milwaukee lost in the first round.
Chris Paul's now out. KD trade. It is that bubble team. Even though if you go back to the bubble, and I don't remember it specifically, but I can remember AD really being dominant at times, and at times for the first time ever, LeBron kind of liking it. In fact, do you remember that bubble where it was the first time ever LeBron was in a championship level thing and was very comfortable dropping the ball low and observing? I think LeBron, one of his assets, I think he's very comfortable. I think deep down he knows AD on both ends of the floor right now is a better player more consistently than I am. And I think LeBron's okay with it. He's always been a great teammate. Do you think he knows that?
Not only is he okay with it, he's been begging for this for years. That was the whole reason why, that's what he wanted Kyrie to be. That's what he's been wanting Anthony Davis to be. I do think this team is actually a little bit better defensively than the 2020 Lakers with their core lineup. They're not as deep because Dwight Howard was so important off the bench for them, but it's the Jared Vanderbilt piece. They never really had a real athletic forward that could defend the way Jared Vanderbilt could. I thought that Laker team had slightly better guard defenders, but also Anthony Davis, I think, is on a defensive run that even he couldn't reach in 2020. The difference is, and the reason why, I was incredibly confident that 2020 Lakers team was going to win. They started the season 24-3. I believed in their defense. I believed in LeBron. I thought they were going to win. The biggest fear for me,
Miami was a bunch of kids. That was sure. I was surprised it was competitive early. They were out of their element.
For sure. And they actually went through some tougher competition in the Western Conference, I thought. That Nuggets team was pretty good. The Lakers were just clicking at a high level. That Houston team that was really weird that played a 5-out, But specifically what scares me with this Lakers team is they just don't have close to the same offensive ceiling as that 2020 Lakers team. Even though that 2020 Lakers team was known as being, somewhat clunky offensively, simply because LeBron James was operating at a much higher level offensively in that playoff run. He was giving you 40 in the finals. If I told you what are the odds that LeBron's going to get 40 tomorrow, you'd be extremely low. He just doesn't seem to have that burst. And then Anthony Davis was on such a jump shooting run in that 2020 bubble. He was making everything out of the post like he was Kevin Durant. I think he shot 50-something% on pull-up jump shots in that playoff run. So as much as I enjoy this Lakers team, I do think they have a slightly higher defensive ceiling with their best lineups because of Jared Vanderbilt, and they have a little bit more flexibility, and they do have more offensive skill in the backcourt, but you win with superstars in the playoffs, and I'm just a little concerned with the up and down nature of LeBron and Anthony Davis offensively. Doesn't mean they can't win it, but I view them as more just in the pack, whereas to me, that 2020 Laker team was head and shoulders above everybody else.
Jason Timpf. Hoops Tonight, such an important part of the volume. His stuff's all over YouTube. Really breaks it down like I don't think anybody else does in this space. I absolutely love it. I'll pass on discussing the Knicks and the Heat. I don't even know how Miami's not even playing well. That's what's amazing. They're not even, they're really not playing extraordinarily well. And I look up and I'm like, Cody Zeller's on the floor and Max Strus and Jimmy Butler's not. We'll discuss that this week when we're on again. But as always, buddy, appreciate it.
Thanks, Colin. See you next time, man.